It's Thursday, so Mayor John Tory joins us this morning. Good morning, Mayor Tory.
Good morning, Faiza.
Let's start with what happened at Lamport Stadium yesterday. We have to talk about it. We saw as a city clearing yet another encampment. We saw chaos, violence, clashes between protesters as well as police. There's criticism that that wasn't the right response. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, the response we try to use to the necessity of clearing the homeless encampments after months and months is to visit over and over again, day after day after day, with our Streets to Homes outreach workers to offer indoor housing to the people in the encampments because they're unsafe, they're unhealthy, and they're illegal. And so we've made 20,000 visits to the encampments over the period of time in the last while during the pandemic. But there comes a time when, frankly, in many cases, we've been obstructed even in our ability to talk to the homeless people by some of the protesters. And so you have to then go and say, today's the day that we're, with lots of notice given, 2 weeks notice, today's the day we're going to have to ask you to leave. And the difference between, say, the one that happened on Tuesday and the one that happened on Wednesday in Alexandra Park versus Lamport Stadium is that on Tuesday there weren't protesters present, or there were very few, and they watched and they protested peacefully, as they're quite entitled to do. Yesterday, the protesters decided they were going to have a confrontation with the police, and so they did. And the result is what you've seen. But the bottom line is that we cannot have the public parks indefinitely tied up in a situation that is unsafe for the people experiencing homelessness, and that is, denying the right to use parks to all people who are entitled to use them. Everybody. The parks are for everybody.
Advocates are also saying that the fact that these encampments keep showing up and popping up more and more, that just shows that there's a problem with shelter availability as well as access to services and affordable housing. What are your thoughts? Is there a deeper problem here, an issue that we need to look at?
Well, I've been the first to acknowledge we have a challenge with respect to affordable housing, but we're also doing more about it than any administration probably in decades. We have 10,000 affordable housing units, for example, that are in various stages right now. We have hundreds of supportive housing units, which are units that are needed by people such as those who live in the encampments, some of them, where there's wraparound supports for people with mental health issues and other kinds of things. And those are the kinds of housing that are offered in many cases to people from encampments. And the other thing they're offered much of the time is a hotel room. And so we're not offering anything that is other than, I think, supportive of those people, but it's indoors, it's safe, and that's what we're doing. But I would say, yes, we have a housing situation, but, I don't see too many of the very same advocates who were there protesting yesterday and throwing objects at the police and so on when I'm out across the city promoting and defending the supportive housing projects that we're putting into different neighborhoods across the city in an effort to provide better housing for the very same people we're talking about here. So, yes, we have a challenge. Yes, the best answer is going to be a permanent form of supportive housing. But, in the meantime, we just can't have people deciding they're going to live indefinitely in public parks where we've had 283 in yesterday's park at Lamport Stadium or yesterday's green space. We've had 283 calls to emergency services so far this year. It's not safe and it's not proper, and it's the need to clear these encampments is supported by the local neighbors who live around those areas who can't use their parks.
Okay, I'd like to shift our conversation talking about COVID-19. The science table has said that vaccine certificates could be used. They do have some concerns about privacy, of course, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are and if this is something that the City of Toronto can implement more at the local level.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's really practical for the city to implement this because the possession of the information of who's been vaccinated and who hasn't rests with the provincial government. All of our vaccinations, no matter where they were done, and we've done so well at that, by the way, and I thank people for their cooperation in that regard. We're, at world-leading kinds of numbers here, not just national leading, but they're great numbers. But it rests with the province. And I've said all the way along, I don't want to get into the philosophical debate about who could be asked what in terms of vaccination, but the bottom line is some people are being asked, including by our own federal government, which says, for example, if you go outside the country and want to come back, you have to show proof of being vaccinated twice. And so I'm just saying there is some documentation that is going to be needed. I think the province has suggested that you can get a receipt from the system that contains all the information, but I think we should just have a very practical discussion involving business, public organizations like education boards, unions, and say, okay, and public health people, and say, okay, I mean, who is going to ask what? mean, what if children show up at school and some parents are saying, well, are all the children in my class, my child's class, vaccinated, and this kind of thing? I think we've got to sit down and at least discuss all these things so that we're prepared to deal with it, and not act surprised in September. And so far, nobody seems to want to have that meeting. But I'm glad the public health table is at least looking at this, because I think it's just a very practical concern, not a philosophical or political thing. Although, as you say, privacy obviously has to be respected.
Okay, Mayor Tory, I'm going to hand you over to Mel and Sid, but fair warning,
Okay.
Sid is looking for hookups for the Jays game, so fair warning.
Oh, well, I saw him say he knew people, so I didn't think he needed anybody like me.
Well, no, see, Mayor